Welcome to the smallest channel on YouTube. This is a little black box podcast segment. Today we're talking all about Stefan Molyneux, and specifically the phenomenon, or whatever you want to call it, Defoo, D-E-F-O-O. Now I'm going to tell you flat out, I don't really have much of a connection to Stefan Molyneux. I've only seen a handful of his videos. It was only until recently that I learned that he was an advocate for something called Defoo, or disassociating from your family of origin. And I was just rather fascinated because the first thing I noticed was he received this enormous amount of backlash. Like, a lot of people are viewing this as something that is terrible, and a lot of people are viewing this as something that is cult-like. I mean, like, I saw him, I just did a quick YouTube search and saw many things that are associated with cult-like status and Stefan Molyneux. However, he actually had a lot of statements that I have been promoting myself, completely independent of him. Like, I didn't even really know anything about his platform, and I came to a lot of the conclusions, and I'll explain about that in a minute. And by conclusions, I mean, I was composing some material to be a guest on someone else's podcast for a podcast called Getting Through. The podcast segment didn't air, long story, but I was pretty much going to say exactly what he said, about Defoo, but it's like, I wasn't even aware that he had been making those similar statements. This all sort of stems from something where, I was having a conversation with somebody once, and we were talking about how children, learn morality from their parents. And I made a statement. This is me talking. I made a statement saying, yeah, but you're not manipulating them when you want them to learn something good. And, the person I was talking to, he shouted at me, and he just said, you are manipulating them. And then I was just like, what am I really arguing about? We're not really in any sort of disagreement on that point, on that particular point anyway. One of the large things we have to admit is parents do manipulate their children, and it can cause a lot of conflict. And if you do want to view that as a form of bullying, there actually is a fair amount of substantial, there are reasons for it. And somebody even just said, the same thing to me in a conversation this year, just like a couple of weeks ago. And they were just like, well, is any time a parent tries to get their kid to do something, is that manipulation? And I was like, maybe it is. I mean, you are getting them to do things without force. It definitely does exist, and it's something very human. Does this mean that you have to completely disassociate yourself from the family of origin? No, not for that sole reason, no, because it's just too human. However, if you have a destructive person in your life, why not disassociate from them? And that's actually the real heart and soul of what I just came to. I was like, why not get rid of them, whether they are your family or not? It's like, somebody once told me, you choose your friends, but you don't choose your family. And I just kind of laughed, and I was like, DNA is just some numbers and lines on a screen. That's all it is. You decide what role your family plays in your life. And you have no reason or obligation to stay with somebody just because you're a blood relative to them. And someone also recently told me the famous saying, blood is thicker than water. Blood is thicker than water. And I was like, are you trying to say that other people who are not your family members don't have blood? We're all human, These are people too. Do other people who aren't your family members have water in your veins? In their veins, rather? I mean, your family's blood is not thicker than anyone else's blood. I got some loud cicadas out my window. Can you hear that? The whole point is that we just have to recognize we have no obligation to stay with people who are destructive to us. We have no obligation to stay with people who are abusive to us. Or even, one of the biggest things that is associated with this is just if your friends or family or people that are in your personal life, if they don't agree with your worldview, should you leave? Why not? I mean, if you find people that are going to be more supportive and more encouraging and more accepting, I don't necessarily think that you have to stay with your family, and I don't necessarily think that it's an immoral thing to leave people like that. One of the things, though, that I would say is, I mean, like, once again, I was composing some things, for something completely independent, and what, we wanted to talk about was, if you have people in your life who are maybe not the most supportive people, whether they are friends, family, co-workers, whatever relation they might be, if they are just, insulting, if they are dismissive, if they are not accepting of you, or if they try to maybe always make you the butt of the joke, or if they just try to put you down for being different, I would just get rid of them. Cut off the relationship. There will probably be less destruction if you just leave that person. If someone is using you just to either make fun of you or exert their narcissism onto you, cut them off. Get out. It's time to go. I mean, there might be a little bit of awkwardness, but there will be much more destruction if you keep that person in your life. And, there was a big thing about one of the critics of Stefan Molyneux who was saying that he's marketing this toward people who are in their late teens and early 20s. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly who I would have talked to about this stuff, because we have so many things where people are experiencing a lot of emotional issues when you're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. It's like everybody gives you the sex talk when you're like 12 or 13 or something. What they really should do is, like, with 18-year-olds, be like, hey, you're about to be a legal adult. Maybe on your 17th birthday and 364 days or something. Right when you're about to turn 18, be like, hey, you're about to become an adult. Your hormones and your emotions are really going to change. You're going to become a lot more irritable soon. Your emotions are going to get a lot more intense. You're going to start to think about things in a different way. And there's a lot of things that come along with that. Maybe you'll be getting very angry. Maybe you'll be getting very sad sometimes. But just get ready for it, I guess. And get ready to be prepared and have establish yourself a support network that can offer you some sort of condolence and some sort of, even friendship. I don't think you have to cut off absolutely everybody in the world from your life. If people do accept you for who you are, yes, you can keep them. But if somebody is not accepting, but they still want you in their life, I would say just leave that person. This is very difficult for college students on a university campus. It can be quite awkward. How do you go about it? I mean, someone that you're going to be seeing maybe in your classes, maybe you'll be seeing them in the dorms, maybe you'll see them, in the cafeteria or the gym. It can be awkward, but I would just disassociate. One day, just sit at the other end of the class. Ask somebody if you can sit with them. Hey, yeah, sorry, I can't sit there. I'm sitting over here now. It will be less destructive in the long run. Because, I'm really saying this because I didn't really reflect on this stuff very well when I was that age. And no one ever prepared me for this sort of difficulties that you have when it comes to trying to deal with mental awareness in your early 20s. Everybody talks so much about, there's mental illness, and everybody talks so much about, being happy, sad, or depressed. But no one really just talks about mental awareness, because that's really what the issue is all about. And I first heard this from one of the parents of a victim of Sandy Hook. And she was just like, we need more discussions on mental awareness. It's about, what do you do when you're angry? What do you do when you're feeling bad? What do you do when, you just have a really bad day and, you just feel terrible? Because that's not a mental illness. That's, about not being able to cope with things like frustration and discomfort and displeasure And of course, non-acceptance, not having this, not having a strong group of people in your life. So it's like, I think that a lot of the critics of Stefan Molyneux are being very kind of bizarre when it comes to this thing, such as leaving your family of origin. I think there's a lot of value to say in that. And the point is, if somebody is being destructive to you, and they're exerting their destructive influence onto your life, you have no obligation to stay with them, no matter who they are. If you do think that someone does have a good influence on your life, you shouldn't abandon everyone. And once again, it's like, if you have a different worldview with someone, whether it's political, religious, ideological, and you want to live with only people who are going to be supportive to that worldview because you feel you'll be stronger together, I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I mean, we all believe things differently. And if you're going to be with people who are encouraging and intelligent, and recognize, the same sort of values of an intelligence, because we have, IQ, EQ, social intelligence, things of those nature. If you all sort of can kind of come to some consensus, maybe you'll be stronger together. So is it okay to leave your family of origin? Yes, absolutely. Is it okay to be around people who have a different worldview than you? Only if they're not destructive. And if you do have any person at all who's even the smallest bit destructive in your life, someone who wants to make fun of you, or try and put you down, or try and push you down on the social hierarchy so they can stay elevated, you're probably best removing that person, no matter who it is. We want to avoid destruction in our lives because no one wants anyone abusive, even if it's emotionally abusive. Nobody wants to deal with someone who is causing them, these type of emotional problems. It's very difficult to talk about with people because it's not something physical. You don't have any sort of physical marks on your body that you can show someone about people who are being, the things that we talked about how they are just, trying to put you down so they can feel elevated. Someone like that, there's not much of a reason to keep them in your life. And most of the time we know this. We're very well aware of it. We just keep them in our lives because we think it'll cause too much trouble to get rid of them. It'll be so awkward that it'll cause more destruction. It won't. Cut them off. You sometimes have to disassociate from people, as awkward as it is. It will be less destructive in the long run.